So, you've probably seen the headlines. Federal agents are on the streets of Washington, D.C. The big question is, why? Are they there to stop a crime wave, or is there something else going on? Well, it turns out the answer, it really depends on who you ask. Welcome to The Explainer.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Because, what looks like a simple story about policing, it's actually two totally different narratives clashing head-on. And that clash, well, it gets to the very heart of a huge disagreement in America right now about power, safety, and what the government's role should even be.
All right, so here are the hard facts. This is what we know for sure. Federal agents are on the ground, and we're talking about officers from some pretty major agencies, like the ATF, that's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and also the U.S. Park Police. They're out there, actively patrolling the city. And the official line from the White House, it's all about stopping violent crime.
So let's start with that first narrative. What's the official case for this intervention, the one coming straight from the administration? Why do they say this is even necessary? President Trump's position is really built on this one very direct claim. I mean, for years, he's described Washington, D.C. as a fundamentally dangerous city. So this deployment, it's being presented as the logical next step, the direct action needed to fix that exact problem.
And look, this isn't some brand new idea. It's a view he's held for a while. But it got a huge boost from a really high-profile crime that just happened, the attempted carjacking of a government staffer. That incident really amplified the message. And the stated goal? It's pretty straightforward. Make it safe enough that you can walk the streets without having to worry about getting mugged.
But, and this is a big but, if you turn your attention to the city's own government and you look at the crime data they're pointing to, you get a completely different picture of what's happening on the ground.
And this is where the story gets, well, really complicated. Because on the one hand, you have the claim that the Capitol is very unsafe. But then you look at the city's own data, and it shows that violent crime has actually been going down for 2 straight years.
In fact, it's not just falling a little bit. As of January of this year, violent crime in Washington, D.C. hit its lowest point in, get this, 30 years. A 30-year low. And that one fact right there is the biggest challenge to this whole narrative of a city in crisis.
And this is where D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser enters the picture. She directly pushes back really hard on the entire premise for this deployment. Her argument is simple. If the federal government is sending in agents, it can't be because of a sudden spike in crime. The numbers just don't back that up.
So from the mayor's point of view, this has very little to do with public safety. She calls it a show of force. Basically, a political move designed to demonstrate federal power inside an American city, not a real response to an actual crime wave.
And she doesn't just criticize, she offers an alternative. This slide really lays it out perfectly. She says, look, if the federal government really wants to help, its resources would be much, much better spent on strengthening our local justice system. How? Help hire more prosecutors to try cases and more judges to hear them. That's a different approach entirely from just putting more officers on patrol.
So, okay, once you see these two clashing arguments and the conflicting data, you start to realize this isn't really just about policing, is it? It's about a much bigger, much more fundamental question about power and control in America.
At its very core, what we're looking at is a classic conflict over jurisdiction. It's this constant push and pull between the authority of the national, federal government and the right of a city's own elected leaders to govern themselves. This kind of tension is basically built right into the American system of government.
So when it all comes down to it, this whole deployment in D.C. forces us to ask a really fundamental question. In any American city, who really decides? Who has the final say? Is it the people who live there and the leaders they elect, or is it the federal government that oversees them? The answer to that question really defines where the power truly lies.